Yuya was a 300-pound waste of space who was too easy to bully. However, everything changed when he gained an overpowered cheat skill that transformed him into a ripped Giga Chad that cracks monster by day and baddies at night. Growing up, Yuya was often bullied by his classmates and family for resembling a live-action Shrek, and the only person who treated him nicely was his grandfather. When he passed away, Yuya inherited his house and all his possessions. However, his parents tried to take everything, and when they failed, they disowned him. Since then, he has been working part-time to support himself. Unfortunately, after he was used as a birthday piñata by some school bullies, he ended up arriving late to work and was fired on the spot. As he dragged his depressed behind home that night, he came across a girl named Kaori who was being harassed by a group of poorly drawn filler characters. When he confronted them, they literally left a baddie to simply beat some kilograms out of the glutinous fatso. Fortunately, the arrival of the police stopped them from turning him into mashed potato. Once they left, Kaori rushed to check on Yuya, but he assured her that he was fine. Then he got up and then walked away like a mindless zombie, leaving everyone confused. When he got home later, he went to the bathroom, and the moment he caught his fugly reflection in the mirror, he immediately broke down in tears. His frustration led him to punch the mirror, which opened a secret door on the wall, much to his shock. Curious, he stepped into the hidden room and realized that it contained all the items his grandfather gathered during his travels around the world. The room also had a strange-looking door that led to a small cottage, and the moment he crossed the threshold, a digital screen appeared before him. It informed him that he gained some skills, one of which was an appraisal skill, which helped him learn that the door led to a different world. After checking his other skills, Yuya checked his stats and was greatly disappointed by how low they were. However, his hope resurfaced after he learned that he had unlimited cheat skills and could become the next Sung Ji-woo. As Yuya looked around some more, he found some weapons and decided to test out his swordsmanship, only to discover he had none. However, he gained a level 1 swordsmanship skill for his attempt. Feeling encouraged, he tried using the other weapons, and after gaining skills for each of them, he automatically unlocked the all martial arts skill. As he began storing his weapons away in his item box, a bloody orge suddenly tried to attack him, but thanks to the magic barrier surrounding the property, it couldn't get in. Yuya was scared out of his mind because it was a high-level monster. However, he didn't run away. He took an attack stance, and although his hands were shaking like a washing machine, he threw the spear at the monster. To his surprise, it passed through cleanly and deleted the monster on the spot, causing him to go from level 1 to level 100. He also gained 10,000 bonus points and a few drop items, some of which converted to cold cash thanks to his asset conversion skill. After rounding up his obesity solo leveling, he eventually returned home, where his body went all Vecna that night. When he woke up the next day, he looked like he'd been sculpted in ancient Greece. However, because his mirror was broken, he didn't see what he looked like, and didn't bother to check his ugly abomination of a face. He then put on some proper fitting clothes he found in his Iskai cottage and went to tend to his new garden. While he was doing that, a slime monster came looking for trouble, but he easily defeated it and gained a rare drop item that increased his stats and stored sunlight as magical energy. The remaining items were converted to cash, so he took the money and went to order himself a new school uniform. After that, he spent the next day reading books to learn more about the other world and slaying monsters to level up even more. The following day, Yuya went to school, expecting everyone to bully him as usual. However, no one recognized him thanks to his isekai K-pop level plastic surgery. When he told them who he was, they were all surprised, which confused him so much that he rushed to the bathroom and couldn't believe how different he looked. Following this, his snobby siblings and his regular bullies took him outside and demanded to know if he'd gone on revenge body with Khloe Kardashian. When Yuya couldn't explain what happened, they began insulting him, but stopped when a limo pulled up, and Kaori got out of it. She ignored everyone else and addressed Yuya, but he didn't remember her, so she reminded him of their first meeting. She also explained that she'd come to offer him a spot at Ase Academy as a thank you for saving her that day. Kaori's father was the school board chairman, and he was the one who suggested that Yuya be admitted after hearing about what Yuya had done for his daughter. Yuya thanked Kaori for the offer, but stated that he lacked the qualifications to attend such a prestigious academy. At that moment, his siblings butted in and asked Kaori to let them enroll instead. Kaori declined their request, saying that she didn't want to be associated with people who treated her savior worse than trash. Her words made them realize that she'd investigated them, so they dropped to their knees in disbelief. Ignoring the entitled brats, Kaori continued trying to convince Yuya to switch to Usei Academy, and her butler suggested that he check out the school before rejecting the offer. She promised to inform his school about his absence so he wouldn't get in trouble for skipping, and before he could refuse, Kaori pulled him into the limo. A little while later, they arrived at Osei Academy, and Kaori took Yuya to speak with her father, who also expressed his gratitude to Yuya. After they settled down, he informed Yuya that his enrollment at the academy would be free, but Yuya still didn't want to accept the offer. When he mentioned that he was as dumb as a bird, Kaori's father gave him a speech on how not to give up before trying. After his speech, he proposed that Kaori spend the rest of the day at the academy and get a feel of how it was. Just then, a female teacher named Rei came in, and Kaori's father told Yuya that his trial classes would be with her. A little while later, Rei introduced Yuya to his new classmates, and they were all too stunned into silence by his jaw-dropping looks to say anything. Rei had to clap her hands to bring them back to their senses and then instructed Yuya to take the empty seat at the back so they could begin the class. During lunch break, the students eagerly gathered around him, wanting to know more about the Greek god that had been dropped in their midst. Their questions overwhelmed Yuya, so a boy named Ryu stepped in and told them to give him space. After they left, Yuya thanked him for coming to his rescue, and Ryu invited him to eat lunch with him. At the cafeteria, they sat with a boy named Shingo, and as they chatted, Yuya learned that Ryu was a sports protege, whom everyone wanted in their club, while Shingo was an otaku who loved games. At the end of the school day, Yuya returned to Kaori's father's office, and the man asked for his thoughts on the school. Kaori admitted it was far better than his school and asked if it was really okay for a loser like him to join the academy. The man assured him that he was more than worthy of joining the ranks of the Usei elites, so Yuya accepted the offer, asking for his continued guidance. After he left the office, he ran into Kaori in the hallway. When he told her he would enroll at the school, she invited him to hang out with her. She took him to a street that was popular among students, and as they walked around, Yuya asked Kaori if she always came there with her friends. Kaori admitted that she was also a friendless loser like him, as everyone avoided her like the plague because of her father's position. When she mentioned that she'd invited him because she wanted some alone time with him, Yuya panicked and quickly drew her attention to a shop selling crepes. While they were eating them, Kaori commented on how delicious they were, and Yuya admitted that he wanted to try everything on the menu. However, he made a mental note not to overindulge, as he didn't want to look like Pumba again. He then asked Kaori how she'd recognized him after his transformation, and she told him that it was because of his eyes. Apparently, he had kind eyes, which she said hadn't changed even though his entire body had been rebranded. As they talked more, she asked him not to address her by her surname, and when he agreed, she became so excited that she offered him a bite of her crepe. Her offer took aback Yuya, but he awkwardly took a bite, and it wasn't until after he did that Kaori realized how couple-coded her actions were. She quickly apologized for putting him on the spot, but he told her not to worry and offered her a bite from his crepe so that they would be even. Those around them observed their little interaction, and the people gushed about how cute they looked together. Later, after Yuya returned home, he went to the other world to train and happened upon a monster attack. The goblin had trapped a girl by a tree after slaying her guards, so Yuya attacked it, and after a challenging fight, he defeated it. He then rushed to check on the girl, but she passed out from her injuries before she could tell him anything. As Yuya tried to figure out what to do, he heard voices calling out for her, so he hid his presence and moved away to avoid any misunderstanding. The next day, while he was ironing his clothes, his thoughts were occupied with the girl as he couldn't help but wonder whether she was doing alright. Eventually, his focus shifted to his limited clothing options, so he decided to go shopping for new clothes. At the mall, everyone stared at him like he was the most handsome K-pop idol they had ever seen, and when he noticed their stares, he became nervous. Meanwhile, in another part of the mall, a photographer named Hikaru was at his wit's end with the manager of a popular male model. The model was supposed to have arrived hours ago for the shoot, but he was nowhere to be found. His manager swore that he was on his way, but the Hikaru didn't believe him, and after complaining, he declared that he was going to find a stand-in. Back where Yuya was, the boy was having difficulty choosing outfits for himself because his fashion sense was non-existent. Just as he was about to give up, two future cougars approached him and asked if he wanted to hang out with them. Yuya knew he couldn't match their freak, so he politely turned them down. The girls became frozen in shock, not because he turned them down, but because his voice had mesmerized them. It wasn't until he was on the escalator that they came back to their senses and began gushing over how he was a dreamboat. On the other hand, Yuya was minding his business when Hikaru spotted him and decided to make him Japan's next top model. Yuya agreed to fill in for the tardy model since he could never turn down those in need. While the shoot was underway, he tried his best not to ogle the female model. Her name was Miyu, and she sincerely thanked him for saving the day. As the shoot progressed, Yuya became even more nervous because it was his first time being so close to a girl. Meanwhile, in the other world, Lexia, the girl he'd saved in the forest, told her guards that she wanted to return to the forest and look for Yuya. Owen, her head guard, tried to stop her by reminding her that as the princess, she had no business tramping through the forest, but Lexia refused to listen. She insisted on finding Yuya to thank him and ordered Owen to mobilize her guards. Back on Earth, Yuya and Miyu finished the shoot, and as they sat down to relax for a bit, Miyu's manager brought them some drinks. While taking a sip from his cup, Yuya almost choked and accidentally spilled some of his drink on himself. Miyu kindly offered him her handkerchief to wipe himself, but he refused to take it for fear that his loser stench would stick to it. As they began talking, Yuya admitted that being a model wasn't an easy job and asked Miyu why she chose chosen that career path. Miyu explained that she'd become a model to gain her parents' attention, as they were often too busy to spend time with her while she was growing up. However, she wasn't so good and only stuck with it because of the fans who had grown to adore her and were rooting for her. She also said that she wanted to be a source of encouragement to those fans in case any of them decided to take the same path she had. Yuya listened attentively as she spoke, and she advised him to take his time to enjoy every moment he got to experience, no matter how small they were. The two soon started laughing at something she said, and Hikaru took the opportunity to snap a few more shots of them together. Just then, the tardy model arrived, and when the mallgoers watching the shoot saw him, they cheered loudly. Miyu wasn't too happy to see him, but the pompous guy didn't seem to care. When she tried to walk away, he trapped her against the wall and began trying to hit on her. Seeing how uncomfortable Miyu was, Yuya interrupted the guy mid-yap and told him to take a hike. The guy responded by trying to punch Yuya, but he slipped on Miyu's handkerchief, which allowed Yuya to flip over like a rag doll. Yuya immediately became worried that the crowd would turn on him for hurting their fave, but was surprised when they started cheering for him. The model couldn't believe what had happened and began complaining, but Hikaru told him to leave if he didn't want them to post the video of his inappropriate behavior. The guy immediately ran off with his manager, and Mayu thanked Yuya for being her knight in shining armor. When she admitted that the guy had been Joe Goldberging her for a while, Hikaru apologized for noticing in time and promised to report the guy to the director so he could be dealt with officially. He then asked Yuya if he'd like to sign a contract to become their exclusive model. Yuya thanked him for considering him, but said he couldn't take the offer because he wasn't built for the runway. Hikaru didn't try to convince him to change his mind, but insisted that Yuya take some clothes as payment for helping them with the shoot. Initially, Yuya didn't want to accept the clothes, but Hikaru smooth-talked him into changing his mind. They then shook hands, and Miyu told Yuya she hoped their paths would cross again. Later that evening, Yuya went to the other world to train and ended up saving Lexia and her people from another goblin pack. Lexia was so excited to see him that she rushed over to him and asked him to marry her, shocking everyone. Owen immediately asked if she'd lost her goddamn mind and reminded her that they didn't know anything about Yuya, but the princess argued that it was love at first sight. She also got mad at Owen for scolding her, and as she began putting him in his place, Yuya suggested that they go to his place to talk. Once there, they began talking, and Yuya learned that Lexia was the first princess of the kingdom of Aracela. Owen assured him that he didn't have to speak to her formally, as the visit was unofficial. He then asked for Yuya's name, and after Yuya told them, Owen deduced that he wasn't from around those parts. Lexia wondered if Yuya was also a royal and began fantasizing about their love story, but Owen grew weary as he didn't know if Yuya was a spy. Nevertheless, he pushed his worries aside and explained that they had returned to the forest specifically to find Yuya so they could thank him for saving Lexia. Before he could say more, Lexia butted in and began telling Yuya that she hadn't stopped thinking of him since she first saw him. The more she talked about her feelings, the more desperate she sounded, and she ended her speech by proposing to Yuya again. Bro gently turned her down, but Lexia was one determined simp, and she told him she was okay with just being his friend for now. Her words made Yuya briefly reflect on his miserable life so far, and he told her he was honored to be her friend as long as she didn't mind his loser status. They then sealed their agreement with a handshake, but Owen interrupted them to tell Yuya about the second reason they came looking for him. Apparently, the king wanted to meet with Yuya to express his gratitude, and Owen told him they were willing to work around his schedule. Yuya promised to visit the royal palace soon, and as the carriage pulled away from his house, Lexia promised Yuya that the next time they met, she would steal his heart for sure. Meanwhile, in a house somewhere in the capital of Aracela, a masked man was informed that the assassination attempt on Lexia had failed. It turned out that she'd been purposely lured into the forest to be unalived, but the goblin finished the men off before they could hurt her. What the informant didn't know was that Yuya had saved Lexia from the goblins, and his employer was pissed about that. He dismissed the guy, but warned him that if he failed again, he would send him to the pearly gates. After the informant scurried away like a rat, the man took off his mask and swore that Lexia would pay for what she did to him. The next day, Yuya marked the day he would meet the king in his calendar and then left for his first day at Osei Academy. He first met with Kaori's father, who welcomed him and wished him a wonderful school year, after which he went to his class and was reintroduced to the class by Rei. Later that day, during physical education class, Yuya watched from the sidelines as Ryu channeled his inner Lionel Messi on the soccer pitch. He was soon joined by a girl who introduced herself as Kaide, and as they were conversing, the self-proclaimed Prince Charming of the class kicked the ball in Kaide's direction. Kaide immediately braced herself for the impact, but Yuya saved her by performing a bicycle kick, which sent the ball directly into the net. Everyone was too stunned to speak after experiencing this soccer miracle, but Yuya didn't notice as he was too busy asking Kaide if she was okay. Before she could respond, Akira came groveling and pleaded with Kaide to forgive him for trying to reconstruct her face. Ryu and Shigno also came, and Ryu told Yuya that he hoped he could be friends with Akira, even though the guy was a bit unstable. Realizing that he was being talked about, Akira called out to Yuya and thanked him for saving his hind. He also began hyping himself up, but that just made Yuya and the others laugh at him. Later, while Kaori's class was out on the field, some low-budget Tokyo Manji gang members burst through the school gates. They put on an elaborate show of power to scare the students, completely ignoring the teachers who were telling them to leave. From the classroom window, Ryu confirmed that the guys were part of the Red Ogre's gang, making Yuya realize that his bullies had followed him to his new school. Back outside, Kaori asked the unwanted guests to leave, but they told her they had come for her. Apparently, she wanted payback for her rejection the other day, but Kaori wasn't intimidated and informed them that the police were already on their way. Yuya's sister assured her that they still had enough time, and that Araki ordered his guys to capture Kaori. Yuya immediately tried to rush to her aid. However, his fear kept him rooted to his spot. Realizing that he was still a wimp even with all his muscle, pushed him into despair, but the voices of his classmates calling his name set him free. He then walked over to the window and jumped out, shocking everyone since they were on the 4th floor. After sticking his landing, he zoomed over to the pitch and was confronted by Araki, who ordered his men to attack Yuya. Yuya easily dodged their attacks, as Kaori was his priority, and when the gang's personal sumo wrestler blocked his path, he showed him that size didn't matter. Seeing how easily he manhandled the guy, the others were so scared they let him pass without attacking him. Their leader, on the other hand, tried to run Yuya down with his motorbike, but Yuya dodged it like an experienced matador, causing the guy to lose control and crash his bike. Eventually, the police arrived, and after they rounded up the trespassers, Kaori thanked Yuya for coming to her rescue. Yuya's brother then began complaining about how the Red Ogres were a useless bunch of idiots, so the leader hoisted him up by his throat. He told the boy that he was going to unalive him because he and his sister were the masterminds behind the failed operation. As he began squeezing harder, Yuya intervened, forcing him to let go of his brother, and when he tried to retaliate, Yuya hit him with his Conqueror's haki. After he fell, Yuya turned to his brother and asked if he was okay, but the boy replied by asking why he'd saved him. Yuya told him it was because Dom Toretto once said, "You don't turn your back on family, even when they do." Hearing this, his siblings began crying and apologizing for all the things they had done to him. The next day, when Yuya went hunting, he came across a king orc beating up a black Fenrir pup. The king orc had an attack power of 20,000, which exceeded Yuya's attack power by force. However, he couldn't bring himself to abandon the helpless pup. He threw his spear at the orc to get its attention, and then charged at it, only to stop short when he saw that his spear had done all the work. He couldn't believe he defeated it so easily, but just as he started crashing out, he remembered the Fenrir pup. The pup was wary of him, so it began growling at him, only to faint because of its injuries. Yuya quickly poured his all-curing potion down its throat, and when it woke up, it began licking him in gratitude. Realizing that the pup was alone, Yuya offered to take it home, and when the pup barked happily, the digital screen appeared, showing Yuya that he'd successfully tamed it. It also showed Yuya the pup's stats, which, to his surprise, were high, considering that it was still young. Yuya then decided to name it Night because of its color, and the pup leapt on him in approval. The next day at school, he asked his classmates for directions to the nearest pet shop because he wanted to get stuff for Night. Kaide immediately requested to see photos of the animal, but Yuya told her he didn't have any because he didn't own a cell phone. The group was surprised by this news, and Shingo asked if it wasn't inconvenient for him not to have a cell phone. Yuya admitted that he hadn't seen the need to have one before, but said he would consider getting one soon. Rei then told him that the nearest pet shop was at the mall, and Kaide offered to accompany him there after school. Later in the day, when he arrived home, he told Knight about how he'd gone to the mall with his friend to get him some items. Part one of those items was a collar and a leash, and he told Knight that he would only have to wear the collar when they went out. After he put it on the pup, Knight seemed happy with his new accessory, so Yuya decided to take him for a walk. At the park, everyone stared at them and whispered about how Yuya had to be one of the plot god's favorites because of his looks. As they continued walking, they ran into Kaori, and Yuya introduced her to his new pet. Kaori happily petted the pup, and as she conversed with Yuya, Miyu suddenly called out to him. She said she lived close by and always took a walk around the park in the evening, so she was surprised to see Yuya there. Yuya was just about to respond when Kaori asked if Miyu was the model he worked with the other day, and he confirmed that she was. He then introduced the girls to each other and also introduced Knight to Miyu. As the group conversed, their face cards kept drawing attention to them, so Miyu excused herself after telling Yuya that she hoped they would run into each other another day. Once she was out of earshot, Kaori nervously asked Yuya whether he was dating Miyu. Yuya quickly clarified that Miyu was just someone he knew, and when he mentioned that he wasn't worthy of being with her, Kaori got angry. However, she refused to tell him why that was. Just then, they heard an older woman cry out for help as her purse was snatched. Yuya immediately ordered Knight to chase the thief and then pulled Kaori with him as he rushed to the woman's side. The woman assured him she was fine, and when she mentioned her purse, Yuya told her not to worry. At that moment, Knight returned, dragging the thief with him. So Yuya told Kaori to call the cops. Upon hearing this, the thief jumped up and tried to attack her with a knife, but Yuya caught and disarmed him in under 2 seconds. Eventually, the police arrived, and after After handling the situation with them, Yuya returned home and immediately went hunting with Knight. As they wandered deeper into the forest, they came across a crystal deer. Yuya hid his presence to avoid being seen by it, but for some reason, the deer could still see through his cloaking jutsu. Having no choice, he revealed himself and engaged the deer with Knight's help, but it pushed them back. Seeing as it wielded two types of magic, Yuya switched strategies, asking Knight to create an opening for him to strike it down. Knight executed his role by injuring the deer, which allowed Yuya to finish it off with his spear. He then bent to check the items which had been dropped and was surprised to find a portable open bath set. After testing to see if it worked, he decided to call it a day and returned home with Knight to soak in the bath. The next day, they went hunting again, and after they defeated a modified porcupine, Yuya saw that his stats had increased and that he'd gained more skills. Knight's stats also increased, and it made him wonder if it was because they were working together. Just as they were about to leave, the stone wall where they had defeated the monster broke away to reveal a cave. Since their middle names were Dora and Boots, Yuya and Knight ventured into the cave and were surprised when flame torches lit up their path to a room where a skeleton lay. Beside it was a book, and as Yuya read through it, he realized the skeleton was the remains of the previous owner of his cottage. The man was known as the Sage, and because of how powerful he was, the gods invited him to join their ranks, but he turned them down. Not surprisingly, the humans wanted nothing to do with him because they feared his power, so he lived the rest of his life alone. He wrote in his book that he didn't want anyone else to go through what he went through, and Yuya couldn't help but feel sorry for the guy. However, he knew if people found out about his powers, he could also end up like the Sage, so he wondered out loud how he could avoid that. Surprisingly, a voice answered, saying his only option was to build trustworthy relationships with people. Yuya assumed his mind was playing tricks on him, but when the voice continued speaking to him, he realized that the Sage was communicating with him somehow. On one of the book's pages, the Sage wrote that he would inscribe anything Yuya wished to know into the book for him, and Yuya said he wanted to know about magic. Immediately, the book started glowing, and the Sage told him that he filled it with every magical theory that he knew. However, Yuya wouldn't be able to use magic because he was an otherworlder and didn't possess the magical pathways those from that world had. To solve that issue, the Sage offered to bestow his magical pathways on Yuya because he believed he was worthy of them. Yuya tried to refuse it, but the man didn't give him a chance and went ahead and transferred the pathways to him. He then wished Yuya a happy life, and in return, Yuya thanked him for his gifts and wished him peace in the afterlife. When he got home later, he began reading the book and learned that he first had to know how to sense magic before he could use it, even though he had the pathway. Always one to experiment, Yuya tried it, and in a few short seconds, he succeeded and accessed his magical pathway. This achievement unlocked his magic energy manipulation skill. Next, he went outside and tried using magic by visualizing what he wanted and giving it a name. This method produced a water ball, and when he looked towards Knight, he saw that the pup had done the same, since they were now connected. Excitedly, he decided to shoot the water ball at a nearby tree, and was shocked when it destroyed multiple trees at once. The next day at school, Ray reminded the class about their off-campus study camp, a 2-day, 1-night camping activity to improve students' focus by putting them into teams of 4. After the announcements, she called out each team, and Yuya learned he was on Team 5 with Kaide, Akira, and a girl named Rin. As they conversed, Yuya admitted he didn't own a rucksack since he'd never traveled before, so Kaide proposed they go shopping after school. Hours later, Yuya, Ryu, Shingo, Kaide, and Rin met Kaori outside the mall because Yuya had invited her. When Ryu began gushing about hanging out with school royalty, Kaori asked them to treat her like a regular classmate. They then went into the mall and, after finding the perfect rucksack for Yuya, proceeded to conquer the arcade. Shingo wanted a particular prize from a claw machine, but he was bad at claw games, so Yuya offered to win it for him. Using his weakness detection skill, he pinpointed the best spot to lift the item and surprised everyone by winning it in one try. Kaide immediately pulled Yuya to another claw machine and had him win a plushie for her. He also won gifts for Ryu, Rin, and Kaide, and they all happily thanked him. After leaving the arcade, Ringo suggested that they visit a cafe, but the girls insisted on going up to the 13th floor to shop, so they agreed to meet up later and parted ways. A few minutes later, while Yuya and the boys were enjoying themselves at the cafe, the fire alarms went off, and they learned that a fire had started in the arcade. They immediately tried to evacuate with the other Malgoers, but Kaide called Ryu and told him she and the others were stuck on the 13th floor. Upon hearing this, Yuya zoomed past the crowd controller like the Flash and rushed up to the 13th floor. Since the fire started on the 10th floor, it quickly spread to the upper floors, and flames were everywhere. Yuya used magic to surround himself with water so he wouldn't get burned, and when he found the girls, he was relieved. After doing a quick scan and confirming that there was no one else trapped there, he quickly picked them up and covered powered them with magic, too. However, the way out was blocked, and the ceiling began collapsing. So Yuya powered up like a Saiyan and drilled through the floor until they arrived safely on the first floor. Everyone was surprised when this happened, and when his friends saw Yuya, they began berating him for being reckless. Eventually, they were removed from the scene, and while the girls were getting checked, Yuya was getting scolded by the firefighters. When Kaori's father arrived, he thanked Yuya for saving his daughter and then hugged his daughter tightly. Meanwhile, in the other world, a mysterious girl with silver hair attacked a talking white rabbit in the forest. When the rabbit asked why she had done that, she told him that she wanted them to form an alliance and destroy the world. After saying this, she vanished like Saitama's hairline, leaving behind a promise that they would meet again. The white rabbit grew increasingly worried by this because he'd sensed earlier that the girl possessed the powers of the divine archer. He told himself that he had to stop her no matter what and pass on his techniques as the deity of kicks. The next day, Yuya learned to use teleportation magic and, after hunting some cave goblins, told Knight it was time to head home. However, Knight suddenly ran off. Yuya chased after him, and when he finally caught up with him, Knight signaled him to hide his presence, so he did. When they moved on further, Yuya was surprised to see an injured girl named Luna surrounded by some goblins. When he tried to play the hero, Knight stopped him, and as they watched, Luna turned the tables on her attackers. She controlled strings like a puppeteer and used them to slice the goblins, but she was still pushed back because of her injuries. When the goblins moved to attack her again, Yuya and Knight jumped in and took them down. However, he realized that more goblins were hiding in the forest and had to switch tactics. He pulled out a magical whip, which grew extra tails and captured his opponents as he swung it. Once they were all dead, he picked up the unconscious girl and began walking home. But Knight didn't want him to do that. As he was trying to figure out why the pup was against the idea, Luna woke up and began struggling against him. This made him drop her, and she hit her head against a tree, so he offered her his all-curing potion. She didn't want to take it initially, since she wasn't sure if he wanted to drug her, but Yuya managed to convince her that it was a healing potion. After she took it, Yuya introduced himself and Knight to her, but the pup kept growling at her. Ignoring him, Yuya asked Luna what she was doing in the forest, and she told him she had come there to train. However, she'd been ambushed by the goblin pack and would have died if he hadn't come along. She then threw the question back to Yuya, and he told her that he was also training, which shocked her for some reason. As they talked further, Luna mentioned that she wanted to find a river and clean up, so Yuya offered her his portable bath. He even set up a magical curtain to protect her privacy, and as she used it, she asked where he'd gotten such a convenient item. Yuya told her it was a drop item from the crystal deer he defeated, which surprised her because crystal deers weren't easy to defeat. After hyping him up for a while, she asked if he'd like to continue his training arc with her. She explained that she had to remain in the darkest region for a while, and having someone to train with would boost her morale. Yuya carefully considered her offer, and after he agreed to train with her, he told her that he wouldn't be around all the time. Luna was so happy with his answer that she didn't think twice when she pulled open the curtain to thank him. Fortunately, her plots remained covered, but that didn't stop Yuya from almost having a heart attack from seeing her unclad appearance. For the rest of the week, Yuya and Luna worked together to fight monsters and level up. Luna taught him what she knew, and he did the same for her. However, on the day before he was to leave for camp, he told her he wouldn't be around for a while. Luna immediately became sad, but she had always known that their alliance wouldn't last for long, so she thanked him for all his help. Later, while Yuya was using the bath, Luna got in with him, so Bro tried to be a gentleman and leave, but she suddenly hugged him. Yuya immediately froze, and Luna used the opportunity to thank him again and say all the things she wanted to tell him before. She promised that she would forever cherish the moments they spent together, but Yuya felt there was something she wasn't telling him. When he tried to find out, she changed the subject and offered to wash his back. Yuya turned to decline her offer, but was shocked to see that her towel had fallen off. When Luna realized it, she became so embarrassed and begged him to look away. The next day, Yuya and the rest of his classmates left for the off-campus study camp, and when they arrived at the location, Ray gathered them in a hall to brief them. During the briefing, she broke the news that they had to scout the mountains for edible plants and fish in the river for their food. However, they weren't allowed to cook them until their teachers confirmed that they were safe to eat. In the case that someone did ingest poison, the sus school doctor would take care of them. She also said they would be graded on their performance at the camp and urged them to do well because their performance would affect the bonuses of their homeroom teachers. In other words, they were her tickets to cashing out that semester. After hearing this, Rin lamented that she was ready to sleep, but Ray shocked them by saying they were all sleeping in the forest, not at the facility. Later, while Yuya's team was setting up their camp, Rin suggested that they split up and find food. Since Akira was practically a blonde Sakura and couldn't be trusted to do anything by himself, Rin offered to take him with her to gather herbs while Yuya and Kita went fishing. By the time Kai, Day, and Yuya arrived at the river, all the good spots had been taken up by their classmates. Yuya had to use his ability to locate another spot, and since it was shallow, he decided to catch them with his hands. Using the techniques Luna taught him, he easily predicted which way the fish would go and started grabbing them. His actions drew the attention of the other students, who gathered around to watch him. Meanwhile, in the other world, Luna stood inside a room, slicing dummies. She noticed that movements were more precise and wondered if it was because of her training with Yuya. Thinking of him made her feel sad because she knew their paths would never cross again, and even if they did, they wouldn't be friends again. It turned out that she was actually an assassin, and she'd been in the forest on a mission. Back on Earth, Yuya and Kaide returned to their campsite, and Kaide began telling Rin about Yuya's exceptional fish-catching skills. Rin was impressed, and after she complimented Yuya, he noticed Akira lying on the ground. When he asked why, Rin told him not to bother with the drama queen, but Akira refused to be ignored and began complaining. Apparently, Rin had used him as a poison tester for all the plants they gathered and also as a decoy when a bear showed up. Upon hearing that he might have ingested poison, Yuya rushed to examine Akira and felt relieved after confirming that he was fine. Afterwards, Yuya checked the plants Akira gathered and removed the only poisonous one before they took it to Rei for inspection. The woman congratulated them on being the first and only group to gather a plentiful supply of edible plants and asked who among them would cook. Akira, Kaide, and Rin all pointed at Yuya, since they were useless in the kitchen, and Yuya took on the role with pride. When the meal was ready, he served it to his teammates, but got no reaction. While he was trying to figure out why, a drunk Rei and two other teachers walked by, and when Rei saw the delicious-looking meal, she asked if they could have some. Yuya happily shared some of the food with the teachers, and just like his friends, they didn't react, which confused Yuya. It wasn't until he began questioning them that they simultaneously said it was the best thing they had ever tasted. Rei even switched to food critic mode and told Yuya that he could out-chef Sanji any day. Watching them happily eat his food made Yuya happy too, because until then, he'd only been cooking for himself. After the meal, Rei suddenly asked him to marry her and become her house husband because she was very useless with household chores. Yuya was too stunned to say anything, but everyone else scolded Rei for making such an absurd request. Rei pretended not to hear them and continued snuggling up to Yuya, so Kaide told her that Yuya was no good for her. Yuya took her words to mean that he was unworthy, but he soon got distracted by Rei, who was still trying to riz him up. She promised that she would wait until he was older, prompting everyone to begin condemning her and asking whether her middle name started with a P and ended with an E. Hurt by their words, Rei began tearing up, so Yuya tried to comfort her, but the drunk woman suddenly pulled his face into her plots because she wanted to hug him. Seeing this, Kaide began trying to free Yuya from her clutches, but Rei's grip was strong, and she wasn't ready to let go. As the tug of war continued, Akira couldn't help but feel envious, since he also wanted to have his face between someone's milkshake. Yuya soon passed out, and when he was revived, Rin asked what it felt like to almost die by plot suffocation. The following morning, Yuya's team discovered that someone had destroyed their belongings and taken all their food. Instead of pointing fingers, they decided to gather more plants to make breakfast, and while they were in the woods, Yuya noticed that Akira was acting strange. Worried, he approached the boy to ask what the problem was and was shocked to see him staring at some claw marks on a tree. Yuya then recalled what Akira had said about Rin using him as a decoy for a bear, and at that moment, the bear revealed itself. The group immediately began running for their lives, but the bear chased them into the campsite, and chaos ensued. The teachers guided the remaining students to a safe area, but when Rei tried to do the same for Yuya's team, she tripped and fell. Just as she was about to get clawed, Yuya engaged the bear in a sumo wrestling contest and surprised everyone by knocking it out. He then turned to ask Rei if she was fine, and the woman assured him that she was. She also promised to give him a lecture on the dangers of fighting a bear, after which she thanked him for saving her life. At that moment, one of the other teachers called out to them to ask if they were okay, and once they confirmed that they were, he relaxed. When they began trying to figure out what to do with the bear, Kaori arrived with animal control and told them that her father had obtained permission for the bear to be cared for at the facility. Kaide then asked whether she wasn't worried that it would attack another person, and Kaori said that if that happened, the bear would be put down immediately. Days later, Yuya returned to the other world to link up with Lexia and see her father. However, he and Knight spotted a pack of red ogres and decided to get rid of them to prevent them from ambushing Lexia's entourage. While they were checking out the drop item, they didn't notice they were being watched by the White Rabbit, who told himself that Yuya was the one he was looking for. Shortly after Yuya put on the helmet, Lexia and her people arrived, but they became cautious because they didn't recognize him with it on. Yuya quickly took it off to reveal himself, and after Lexia greeted him, she asked him to get in the carriage so they could leave. Yuya tried to ask if he could bring Knight along, but the pup suddenly jumped on Lexia, pushing her to the ground. The next moment, the tree behind Yuya came crashing down, but he quickly split it in half to prevent it from hurting everyone. Owen then demanded to know what was happening, but Yuya didn't respond because he'd noticed the strings which had been used to cut down the tree. Upon realizing that Knight had pushed Lexia down because he'd sensed the danger, he asked the pup to find the person responsible. The person was Luna, and just as she was about to leave, Yuya snuck up on her, and when she tried fighting back, she fell and hit her head. Her mask also fell off, and when Yuya saw that she was the one, he couldn't believe it. Lexia arrived just then and asked who Luna Luna was, to which Yuya revealed that she was the one who tried to attack her. He then pleaded with Lexia to allow him treat and speak to Luna because he believed there was a reasonable explanation for what happened. Before Lexia could respond, Owen and the other guards arrived, so she blocked their view of Luna and told them that she was going to hang out in Yuya's place for a while. She and Yuya then took off running, but to ensure that they shook off the guards, Yuya used teleportation magic to get them to his house faster. Once there, he lay Luna on his bed and turned to Lexia, who asked him to explain his relationship with the assassin. After Yuya finished explaining things, Lexia switched topics to his ability to use teleportation magic. She warned him never to use it in front of others again because it only existed in stories, and if people found out that Yuya could use it, their entire world would be turned upside down. Yuya promised that he wouldn't, so she turned her attention to Luna and told her to stop pretending that she was asleep. Seeing as she'd been caught, Luna opened her eyes and sat up. The princess then demanded that Luna tell them about herself, but Luna refused, saying she didn't remember applying for any job. It wasn't until Yuya said he also wanted to know more about her that Luna agreed to talk. She told them that she was an orphan who stole to survive on the streets until someone took her in and began training her. He not only taught her to read and write, but also to take lives because he was an assassin and a member of the Dark Guild, which was basically an underground criminal association. When she was old enough, she joined the guild, and because of her skills, she earned the name Headhunter in a short time. As Luna continued speaking, she told them that the order to assassinate Lexia had come in a few weeks ago, and now that she had failed, they would surely send someone to get rid of her. She said Lexia was free to do with her as she pleased, but the princess surprised her by saying she wanted her to be her personal guard. Luna immediately asked if her senses had taken leave of her, but Lexia assured her that she was being serious. According to her, if Lexia became her guard, the Dark Guild wouldn't be able to reach her, but Lexia still refused to take the position. She said that she wasn't worthy of standing beside Lexia because her hands were stained with blood, but Lexia disagreed. She took one of Luna's hands in hers and told her that her hands were beautiful and soft. When she asked how she got them to be that way, Luna blurted out that it was Yuya's portable bath. However, she caught herself and quickly pulled her hand from Lexia's grasp. Annoyed by her refusal, Lexia climbed onto the bed and made a royal decree, saying that Luna had to be her guard because she failed to unalive her. Meanwhile, Owen and the other guards were being chased by goblins because Owen refused to leave without the princess. Back at the cottage, Luna agreed to become Lexia's guard, and Lexia asked her to tell her everything about Yuya's magical bath. Luna explained that it was a rare drop item that helped a person recover from fatigue, replenish their magic, and had a positive effect on beauty. Hearing this, Lexia insisted on using the magical bath with Luna, so Yuya set it up for them. While they were using it, Lexia asked Luna if she had feelings for Yuya, and she denied it, so the princess told her that she was going to marry him. Immediately, Luna voiced her disagreement and had no choice but to admit that she felt something for Yuya. Surprisingly, Lexia wasn't upset, and she even told Luna that they were now rivals in love. She challenged her to try and fight her for Yuya's love, and Luna gladly accepted the challenge. The following morning, Yuya and the girls met up with Owen and the other guards at the entrance of the forest, and Owen couldn't have been happier to see the princess alive. When he noticed Luna, he asked who she was, and Lexia said she was the assassin who had tried to unalive her. Immediately, the guard pointed their swords at Luna, and even when Lexia told them to stand down, they refused to listen. Owen said Luna couldn't be trusted, but Lexia said that she was and pointed out that if she truly wanted to hurt her, she would have done that while they slept. The man couldn't believe that she'd slept with the enemy, but agreed to stand down because he realized that Lexia was right. After his men did the same, Yuya informed everyone that he could no longer accompany them to the capital due to a personal matter. Since there was nothing they could do, Owen told Yuya to come to the capital whenever he had the chance. When it was time for them to leave, Luna spoke to Yuya for a while before mounting her horse and following the carriage. However, when Lexia kept waving at Yuya, she hopped down from her horse and ran back to kiss his cheek. She claimed it was a thank you kiss and told him to be prepared for the next time they met. Lexia immediately became jealous and demanded that Owen stop the carriage, but the guard pretended not to hear her. A little while later, Yuya and Knight found a small river, and since the place was peaceful, he set up his bath to open air mode. As they soaked in the water, he suddenly noticed a small pig, and the moment he spoke to it, he was alerted that he tamed it. Using his appraisal skill, he checked its stats and saw that it possessed a skill called Holy Ground. Curious, he asked the pig to activate it, and when it did, he realized it was a skill which helped with recovery. Excitedly, he thanked the pig, and just as he named it Akatsuki, Knight rushed over with his alarm clock to tell him that he was going to be late for school. Fortunately, he made it in time, and during homeroom, Rai announced that it was almost time for the annual ball game competition. She urged them to do their best as their performance would affect her bonus. Later in the day, their physical education teacher had them practice soccer, and Yuya was the goalkeeper for one of the teams. As usual, Ryu was a force to be reckoned with, but Rin said they needed everyone to do their best if they wanted to win. Because of that, she cooked up a plan and asked Hai Day to start jumping. The unsuspecting girl did as she was asked, and almost immediately, all the boys turned to look at her bouncing globes. Happy with the outcome, Rin got behind her and started controlling her plot movements, which just made the boys stare harder. Surprisingly, it even motivated Akira to try and score a goal, but Yuya pulled a sick move move and caught the ball. When he asked what to do with the ball, Ryu told him to throw it as hard and as far as he could. Yuya did as he was told, and to everyone's surprise, the ball flew into the other team's net. After school that day, Yuya was approached by a model scout and the director of the magazine Miyu modeled for. The director told him she wanted him to sign a contract with them, but Yuya declined. The woman couldn't believe that he hadn't jumped at the offer, and as she began ranting to her scout, Miyu stepped out of the car. She apologized to Yuya for her director's behavior, but the woman argued that she'd done nothing wrong. Just then, a runaway flyer that Kaori was chasing landed on the ground beside them. Yuya helped her pick it up, but the director snatched it away from him, and once she saw that the flyer was for the ball sports competition, a light bulb lit up in her head. She immediately began pulling her scout into the school so they could speak with the chairman and convince him to let them take pictures at the event. That night, while Yuya was hunting with his two sidekicks, a large pig suddenly appeared behind him. Initially, Yuya assumed that Akatsuki had eaten the Deka Deka no Mi, but when he saw that the little piggy was still beside him, he realized his mistake. Sadly, he couldn't react fast enough and was smacked into one of the trees with extreme force. Knight and Akatsuki tried to run to his aid, but Yuya told them to stay back. He then checked the large pig's stats and learned that it was called a mithril boar. It was also extremely strong and possessed a magic reflection skill, which didn't bode well for Yuya. To give himself a fighting chance, he tried to drink his all-curing potion, but the boar charged at him again and hit him multiple times. Yuya knew he couldn't win against the beast, so he tried to keep it occupied long enough for Knight and Akatsuki to escape. When it seemed like his plot armor would fail him, help arrived in the person of the white rabbit. It sent the boar flying with one kick, and when it tried to retaliate, he finished off without even touching it. Yuya was stunned by what he witnessed and immediately checked the rabbit's stats to confirm who he was. After that, he thanked the rabbit for saving them, but the rabbit waved it off and asked him to show him how he kicked. Yuya tried to go first, but Akatsuki stopped him, wanting to show off a little, but the rabbit said he had no talent. Knight went next, and the white rabbit commended him, saying he had some potential. When Yuya finally did this, the white rabbit just smiled and got up to show them what a real kick looked like. His kick was so powerful that the air it released put holes in the center of some trees lined up in a row. He then instructed Yuya to do the same, but the boy struggled before he managed to bring down one tree. After seeing Yuya's accomplishment, the white rabbit began fighting him one-on-one and didn't stop until the next day. While they were taking a break at Yuya's cottage, Yuya asked the white rabbit why he was training him, and the white rabbit told him it was because he'd chosen him as his successor. To help him understand why, he explained that he was part of a group of beings called the Divine. Every divine being was a master of a particular field, and one of their duties was to protect the world from the beings known as the Vile. The Vile represented the negative aspects of the world, as they always formed whenever malice was crystallized. After listening to him, Yuya told the rabbit that he couldn't become his successor. However, he asked the rabbit to continue training him because he wanted to be strong enough to protect those he cared about. The rabbit agreed on the condition that Yuya would teach him how to use magic, and they shook hands to formalize their alliance. Later that day, the rabbit made Yuya fight a king mithril boar because, apparently, the Vile were by far stronger than it. Yuya struggled for a while, but managed to turn things around with his whip and spear. His victory over the high-ranking boar helped him level up so much that he evolved and gained new skills. The rabbit then told him to head home and took off before Yuya could say anything. Later that week, the day of the ball sports competition arrived, and the magazine director brought her photographers to capture Yuya in all his glory. Yuya had been selected to play ping pong, and when his opponent served the ball, it flew past Yuya so fast that he couldn't even return it. However, that one shot was all it took for Yuya to master the guy's gameplay. So, when he served again, Yuya easily returned the serve, but it was so powerful that it burned a hole in the table. Upon seeing this, Yuya immediately forfeited the game and ran out because he didn't want the next hole to appear in the guy's head. He was still catching his breath when Kaede came to pull him to the volleyball court to sub in for someone. The game only lasted a few seconds because Yuya's serve destroyed the court, and their opponents forfeited out of fear. While Yuya was sulking about destroying the volleyball court, he and the girls heard someone scream. Curious, they rushed to the tennis court to see what happened and saw Kaori, who pleaded with Yuya to sub in as her teammate. Before he could respond, the medics brought her injured teammate out of the court, and he warned Yuya to be careful. Despite this warning, Yuya agreed to take the guy's place since he was basically indestructible. After the whistle was blown, Kaori served the ball and almost took off Yuya's head. When she tried again, her racket flew instead, and that was when he realized that Kaori was the danger on the court, not their opponents. As a result, he began playing the two-person game as if it were a solo match and didn't let Kaori touch the ball once. When she almost did, her clumsiness activated and her racket flew towards the photographers. However, Yuya maintained his composure and won the match for their team. For some reason, Kaori almost fell, so Yuya grabbed her, and as he held her close, the photographers began taking shots from every angle. After school, Yuya met Kaori at the gate, and she invited him to walk home with her. As they walked, she thanked him for saving her again and said she wanted to repay him. Yuya told her that she didn't have to do that because just being with her made him happy. Kaori hadn't expected him to say that, so when he crossed the road, she called out to him to wait and close his eyes. Yuya did this without questioning her, and when she got close enough, she lightly kissed him on the cheek and moved away. Yuya had no idea what she'd done, and when he asked her about it, she refused to tell him, claiming it was a secret. Meanwhile, in the other world, the rabbit was attacked by the mysterious girl again, but he fought back using magic. Surprised, the girl pointed out that he wasn't supposed to be able to use magic, and the rabbit told her that he'd been learning from Yuya. The name wasn't familiar to her, but she declared that she would get rid of Yuya first before the rabbit. After she left, the rabbit told himself that he needed to teach Yuya most of his techniques before he ran out of time. Days later, the magazine director sat in her office with Kurosaka looking at the new issue, which had photos from the ball sports competition. She told Kurosaka that once the magazines went on sale, everyone would try to sign Yuya to their agency. However, she had a plan to convince Yuya to change his mind and sign with them. The next day, Kaori went to Yuya's house to study, and when she excused herself to go to the bathroom, she found his hidden room and the Isekai door. When Yuya walked in and saw her, she apologized for snooping, but he told her it was okay. He then revealed what the door was and asked her to put her hand through it so he could prove it. Kaori tried, but the magic barrier wouldn't let her hand pass through, and Yuya explained that it would remain that way until he granted her entry. He then revealed his powers to her by creating a water ball and explained how every unnatural thing he'd done was thanks to the skills he acquired in the other world. Kaori was impressed, and as she stared at the door, he asked if she wanted to visit the other world with him. The curious girl immediately agreed, so he took her hand and led her through the door. As she looked around the garden, her stats screen suddenly popped up, and Yuya was surprised to see that her stats were higher than his when he first came there. Kaori asked why, and he told her that it was because he was the lowest of the low until he leveled up. He said his former self wasn't the kind of person anyone would want to hang around, but Kaori didn't comment on that. Instead, she asked him to show her around, and Yuya told her it wouldn't be like a walk in the park because there were monsters everywhere. He promised he'd show her around another time and asked that she keep everything a secret. Kaori liked the idea of sharing a secret with Yuya, and it made her feel all giddy inside, so she assured that her lips would remain sealed. Meanwhile, at the royal palace, Lexia and Owen went before the king, who asked where Yuya was. Owen explained that Yuya couldn't make it because of some unforeseen circumstances, but the king quickly deduced that it had something to do with Luna. Luna didn't deny it and even admitted that she had been hired to assassinate Lexia, but failed. Upon hearing this, the king told her that the punishment for her crime was death and then picked up his sword. Lexia screamed for him not to do anything, but the king ignored her and charged at Luna, who surprisingly didn't flinch when the sword stopped inches away from her face. The king commended her for figuring out that the sword would cut through anything that tried to resist it, revealing that he'd only stopped because her strings had captured him. On the other hand, Lexia condemned her father's actions and told him that she'd spared Luna's life and hired her as her personal guard because she trusted her. Seeing how determined his daughter was to keep Luna by her side, the king had no choice but to acknowledge Luna's position as one of Lexia's guards. After leaving the throne room, the king went to speak to Owen alone, and the guard revealed to him that Luna was the infamous headhunter. Surprised, the king asked how Yuya fit into the assassination story, and Owen told him that Yuya had captured Luna. However, the guy didn't stop them and accidentally revealed that Lexia had spent the night at Yuya's house. Immediately, the king went nuts and sliced a chair in half, after which he kicked his blade and swore to feed Yuya's blood to it. Meanwhile, the mysterious masked man, who was revealed to be the prince, was informed that the assassin sent to eliminate Lexia had become her personal guard. His informant also told him about Yuya and said he had been invited to the palace. Surprisingly, the prince didn't get mad and said the situation was working in his favor. He pulled out a magic sealing orb and explained that once its domain was expanded, magic couldn't be used inside it. He instructed the guy to use it inside the palace so that all the magic users guarding the king would be rendered useless. Owen and Luna would be the only ones capable of foiling their plans, but they would be spread too thin, which would allow the prince's people to finish off Lexia and the king. Curious, the informant asked what the prince would do if people started suspecting him, and he said he'd shift the blame to Yuya. A few days later, school went on a short break, so Yuya finally decided to visit the capital. When he arrived in the first town, he was amazed to discover that demi-humans existed there. After enjoying the view for a while, he went to the merchant's guild to register himself and sell some peppers. The man in charge was more intrigued by the containers than the pepper, so he offered to buy everything for a bag of gold coins, which, according to him, would put Yuya on the same level as Elon Musk. He also handed Yuya his guild card, which he said was his method of identification. Yuya then asked how he could get to the capital, and the man told him to take a stagecoach, which he did. A few hours later, Yuya arrived at the capital with Knight and Akatsuki and went to the castle. Owen escorted him from the gates to the throne room, where the king went from thanking him to accusing him of corrupting his daughter. He also said it was disrespectful of Yuya not to bring any many gifts for Lexia, and the poor boy began apologizing. However, he suddenly remembered the drop item betting he'd acquired after defeating some monsters on his way to the capital, so he presented that to them. Upon seeing it, the king grew angrier and accused Yuya of blatantly showcasing his cultured intentions towards Lexia. When he tried to pull out his sword, Owen immediately rushed to stop him and reminded him that Yuya wasn't from their kingdom, so that he couldn't understand their customs. It turned out that giving someone betting as a gift was another way of proposing to them, and the king would rather die than let anyone marry his daughter. Pushed by his anger, he pulled out his sword and charged at Yuya. However, his plan was halted by the sudden arrival of assassins. Their leader activated the magic sealing orb when the magic users tried using magic on them, so Owen and Luna immediately sprang into action to protect the king and the princess. Yuya also did the same, but first, he instructed Knight to attack and told Akatsuki to heal the injured. After all the assassins were defeated, Lexia rushed to hug Yuya and praised him for being her savior. Luna tried pulling her away and asked Yuya if he'd gotten even stronger since the last time they met. Yuya tried to answer, but couldn't because he noticed the king glaring at him. Eventually, Lexia let go of him and began scolding her father for being angry with their savior. The king tried to defend himself, but was interrupted when one of his men came to show him the royal pin they found in one of the assassin's possessions. Later, when Yuya went to see Lexia, she asked if he'd like to go sightseeing with her. Just then, Luna arrived and offered to go in Lexia's place since Lexia's life was still in danger, but the princess refused. As they began arguing over the issue, Owen walked by and offered to take Yuya around town on their behalf, but both girls told him to bug off. In the end, they both left the castle with Yuya, but Owen secretly followed them because he was worried. He believed he was doing a good job, but Yuya had noticed him from the beginning. When the trio passed by the Adventurers Guild, Yuya expressed his desire to join, so Luna offered to join with him. Lexia immediately protested, reminding her that she was her guard, but Luna replied that she needed another source of income. When they went inside, Lexia kept complaining that she didn't want Yuya and Luna to spend time alone since they could go on quests together as adventurers. Luna told the whiny princess to relax and reminded her that Yuya was a very busy person, so they wouldn't always be together. The guild receptionist then handed Yuya and Luna forms to fill out. While doing that, Yuya became confused when he saw a section asking for his magic energy capacity. The receptionist explained that it was for him to write down how much magical energy he had after he'd measured it with a particular magic crystal. When Luna placed her hand on the crystal, it glowed yellow, and she said it was because she had never been skilled with magic. When Yuya placed his hand on the crystal, it went from blue to bright white and then broke into pieces. Everyone was surprised, and the receptionist said his magical energy had to be insane for it to break the crystal like that. Yuya apologized and offered to pay for it, but the woman told him not to worry and collected their completed forms. While going through them, she saw that Yuya had written down 3 types of magic and said he ought to be a legend for that. Magic wasn't something most people could master easily, and the fact that he could even use 3 types was very impressive. Despite the praise, Yuya could only thank his stars that he hadn't written all types of magic. The receptionist then processed their forms, and after she returned with their guild cards, she explained that, as new adventurers, they would begin at the lowest rank, F rank. Yuya asked if their rank would affect the number of quests they could go on, and she told him that it didn't. After she finished briefing them on the do's and don'ts, the trio went to the request board to pick up a quest. However, they were interrupted by a female adventurer who tried to hit on Yuya because, apparently, he was her type. Luna and Lexia tried to pull her away, but the woman refused to budge and kept telling Yuya about all her fine qualities. Eventually, she let go of him and told him that she would love to go on a quest with him whenever he was free. After she walked away, Lexia declared that she, too, would register to become an adventurer so she could chase Yuya's fangirls away. Luna told her to think about how much that would stress Owen, since the guard would be doing all the work. Lexia knew she was right, so she demanded that they pick a quest which she could participate in. To grant her wish, they took on a gathering quest and, while doing so, received word that the prince had been located. Owen asked Yuya to help them capture the prince, and Yuya agreed. He then rode off with Owen and a few guards after they instructed Luna to take Lexia home. When they arrived at the location, it was quiet, but when one of the guards opened the door, he was hit in the leg with a knife. Yuya quickly took the lead and saw that the prince was holding another guard at knife point, so he instructed Knight to disarm him. After Knight did that, the hostage ran off, and the remaining guards surrounded the prince. Owen pleaded with him to surrender, but the prince said he'd rather take his own life than do that. According to him, no one would care if he died, and he'd be doing them a favor by dying. As he rambled on, Yuya teleported to his side and tried to take the knife, but the prince turned the knife on him. Yuya kept dodging all his attacks, and in the end, the prince tripped over Akatsuki. The guards then surrounded him, and Owen thanked Yuya for helping them. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew into the room, and the mysterious silver-haired girl revealed herself. The prince looked happy to see her, but she told him that he'd failed his mission, so she no longer had any use for him. When she mentioned that she'd only been helping him to try and take the throne so he could start a war, the prince realized he'd been played. He immediately started complaining, but she ignored him and picked up a knife to stab him. However, someone shot an arrow through the window and knocked the knife out of her hand. This annoyed the girl, so she unleashed her magical arrows on the house, and everyone started running around like headless chickens. Yuya asked why she was doing all that, and she revealed that it was because she wanted to destroy all of humanity. She then aimed the arrows at them, but Yuya countered them with a spell. When Owen thanked him, the girl realized that he was the person the White Rabbit had spoken of. However, she had used most of her stamina and couldn't engage him properly, so she retreated. Yuya was then left wondering who she was and why she knew him. Later on, the prince was brought before the king and stripped of his shirt and mask. Luna and Yuya were surprised to see him covered in scars, but the king and Lexia averted their gazes. The prince demanded to know why they couldn't look at him, and reminded Lexia that he was that way because of her. It turned out that he'd been hit with Lexia's magic when she was younger, and because of how powerful it was, it injured him badly. The king argued that the injuries Lexia's magic inflicted on him ought to have healed a long time ago, and the prince admitted that they had. However, he'd lost his mind after what happened, and the only way to calm himself was to inflict more injuries on himself. He accused his father of shunning him rather than helping him, and the king said it was because his condition was beyond the king's power to fix. Listening to the prince talk about what he went through made Yuya recall his pre-level up days. So when the prince requested that his father end his life because he was tired of the suffering, Yuya raised his hand. The king angrily told him that an outsider had no say in their affairs, but Yuya didn't back down and said he had something which could help. He then pulled out his all-curing potion from his item box and forced the prince to drink it. In the next second, all his scars and wounds were healed. Everyone was surprised by this miracle, so Yuya explained what the potion he'd used was, but that just doubled their surprise. The herb he'd used to make the potion was very rare, and the fact that he'd willingly given it to someone else was truly astonishing. The prince was glad that all his scars were gone. However, he said it didn't matter because he would still be condemned to death because of the things he had done. Surprisingly, Lexia declared that she had forgiven him and insisted that her father do the same. The king reminded her that her brother had sent assassins to take them out, but Lexia said that if her father had put the Dark Guild in check, her brother would have never gotten involved with them. This shut the man up, and in the end, the prince was pardoned, but all his lands were taken away. After his trial, the prince thanked Yuya for saving his life and talked to his father about rewarding Yuya. The king agreed and declared that Yuya would receive all of the lands and houses seized from the prince, as well as the title of Lord Knight. Yuya was shocked by his declaration, but decided not to refuse the reward. Later, he retired to the guest room and passed out almost immediately from exhaustion. However, he dreamt about fighting the mysterious girl, and just as things were getting heated, he jerked awake. The next day, Yuya went to school as usual, but as soon as classes were over, he ran back home and returned to the other world to continue training in preparation for the next time he met the mysterious girl. Surprisingly, she attacked him while he was training, so he demanded to know what she wanted from him. The girl told him it was because he was a threat to her revenge plans and then attacked him again. At that time, Kaori rang Yuya's doorbell but got no response. Instead of leaving, she decided to go inside and look for him in the other world. As she looked around for him, the sounds of Yuya's fights with the girl caught her attention. The fight had become so intense that they destroyed parts of the forest and kept going. Yuya and Knight tag-teamed the girl and managed to knock her down with the techniques the White Rabbit taught them, but it still wasn't enough to stop her. She pulled out a large arrow, filled it with her energy, and shot it at Yuya. Fortunately, Yuya dodged it, but she followed up with her smaller arrows, so he and Knight ran for cover. Seeing this, Kaori called out to Yuya, making him lose his focus momentarily, so he took a long time to react when the girl shot another large arrow at him. The impact of the arrow's explosion knocked him to the ground, and she used the opportunity to sneak up on him from behind. Yuya braced himself for her next attack, but the White Rabbit arrived just in time and saved him. He then apologized to Yuya for arriving late, explaining that he'd been investigating who the girl was. Turning his attention to her, he addressed her as Yudi, and she calmly demanded to know how he knew her name. The White Rabbit ignored her question and said he knew she was the apprentice of the Divine Archer, who had been slain recently. Yudi admitted she was and said she would avenge her master by destroying the very humans who betrayed him. The White Rabbit told her that her master wouldn't approve of her using the techniques he taught her the same way Vile would, but Yudi told him that she didn't care. She explained that even though she inherited her master's techniques, she never inherited the title of divine, so she had no obligation to protect anyone. When she attacked again, Yuya and the rabbit performed a few acrobatic moves to avoid getting hit. As the fight carried on, Knight bit one of Yudi's legs, and the White Rabbit kicked her into a nearby boulder. Despite this, Yudi kept moving and transformed into a vial before their eyes. The White Rabbit immediately engaged her in a fight, and as they fought, Yuya noted that they were on the same level. Unfortunately, the White Rabbit got knocked down, and when Akatsuki saw this, he activated his Holy Ground skill. Surprisingly, this stripped Yudi of her powers, so Yuya quickly knocked her out. The White Rabbit then told Yuya that he would let him decide Yudi's fate and left before Yuya could protest. Shortly after that, Kaori came to find Yuya, but he noticed a large boar behind her and quickly threw his spear at it. Kaori was so shocked by what happened that she didn't move for a while. This led Yuya to think she was scared of him, so he tried to explain himself, but Kaori cut him off. She assured him she wasn't afraid of him because no matter how much he leveled up, he would always be the same person who defended her when no one else did. In the days that followed, Yuya introduced Kaori to Luna and Lexia, and the three became fast friends. As for Yuri, he helped her enroll at the academy and continued enjoying his new life with his friends. Do you think Yuya should tell his other friends about his isekai adventures? Or should he keep living a double life like every superhero ever to exist? If you watched up to this point, comment on who you think Yuya should end up with. Also, check out this next video right here.